In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make your very own coloring book bag in the hoop. The coloring book bag comes in 3 different sizes, and today I'm going to demonstrate the 2 primary sizes. There's a small 4x4 size, and then there are actually 2 sizes that use the same instructions. There's a 5x7 and a 6x10. What's cool about the differences on these 2 sizes and the 2 different styles is this one, the zipper is exposed, whereas the larger style, the zipper is actually concealed. So there's going to be some really cool tricks and tips that you're going to learn along the way. And what's really great is there are several different styles of the coloring book bag in the hoop. All of the instructions are exactly the same, and this way you'll be able to learn the technique and then have lots of fun. So grab your machine and let's get stitching. So here are all the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a pressing board and a steam iron, a seam ripper, and some thread snips. These happen to be my favorite, the ones with the little hook at the end. You also need a pair of short craft shears and fabric shears, and a point turner. I actually prefer the bamboo point turner because it works really great with a steam iron, which I will show you later. You're going to need a pre-wound bobbin or 60 weight bobbin thread, some embroidery thread, and you will also need embroidery needles. Some Wonder clips are great to hold the lining closed toward the end of the project. To go along with it is a hand sewing needle, some clear adhesive tape, and of course your embroidery hoops. Now you're going to need some fabric markers. I like the Tulip brand and the Fabrico brand. They're really nice, but you'd be surprised what you have in your own stash. You can use pretty much any kind of marker. Just test it out, make sure it presses nicely. Even Sharpie markers work really great. And then there are some traditional artist markers. My favorite one to use is Copic. So there are lots of different markers that you can use. Even check the dollar store, you'd be surprised. And last but not least is the Easy Point and Turner. In the PDF instructions, I show you where each material is placed in the final project. This video should just kind of give you a good idea of where all the pieces go. But with the zipper, I wanted to show you that you could even use the extra zipper tail instead of the loop. Something to consider. In addition to everything shown, the larger bags use a long ribbon for the handle and some pretty beads. To add body in the inside of the bag, you're going to need either foam or a fusible thin batting. I like the thin batting for the smaller size and the foam for the larger sizes. The instructions call for a tearaway stabilizer, but there are many on the market. There's really thin tearaway, then there's a medium to heavyweight tearaway, and then there's a tearaway that has really loose fibers. A lot of times this is a tearaway wash away. I try to avoid this one for this project because it's not as durable. So what I like to recommend is a medium weight tearaway stabilizer. I'm first going to start with the 4x4 instructions, and then you'll be able to see the basics and have all of that ready for when you do the 5x7 and the 6x10 size. It's time to press your fusible interfacings. You've got your bottom front, your top front, and your back pocket interfacing. Press the back pocket interfacing to the lower portion of the pocket, and then press the top to create the fold, then the bottom front, and of course the top front as well. And now it's time to hoop your tearaway stabilizer. I do like hooping on my hoop mat from Dime. There is a link in the description below where you can watch a video on how to actually use this and all the things you can do with it. Get that stabilizer in there nice and tight. You'll notice I push the inside hoop toward the outside, and then I tighten it even tighter. Go ahead and thread the top and the bobbin and insert a nice fresh embroidery needle. So stitch number 1, which is the positioning stitch for your zipper. With the zipper facing right side up and the zipper pulled toward the left, place the zipper right down the center between the width and the height of that positioning stitch. Place some tape across the outside of the zipper to secure in place and sew the next stitch. This is the secure stitch, and you can remove that tape with your little point turner or seam ripper. Now it's time to place our bottom front pieces. Turn the bottom front with the wrong side facing up and the long edge along the bottom of the zipper tape. Use some clear adhesive tape to secure that in place, and turn the hoop to the wrong side and repeat the same steps for the bottom lining. Make sure that it's wrong side facing up and that the wide edge is along the bottom of the zipper tape positioning stitch, and secure with some tape, and sew stitch number 3. When you're finished sewing, remove the hoop from the machine and go ahead and remove the tape from the front and the back. Pull the front bottom down and use a point turner, or I like to use the By Annie stiletto and pressing tool to press that seam down flat. And sew stitch number 4. And then you can go ahead and sew stitch number 5 with the black. This is the detail of all of the different coloring book bags. Every one of them will be slightly different. This one is the bumblebee. Once your detail stitch is complete, turn your hoop to the wrong side and press down that bottom back lining. Use some tape along the bottom edge to hold it in place. Turn your hoop to the right side, and we're going to take the top front with the wrong side facing up and the long edge along the top of the zipper tape. Secure with tape, just double check that's what you want, and turn your hoop to the wrong side and repeat it for the top lining. To help prevent the materials from shifting, I also like to add a little piece of tape right there. Now insert your hoop into the machine and sew the next stitch sequence. When you're finished sewing that stitch, go ahead and remove the hoop from the machine and remove the tape from the front. Fold up that top front and use a pressing tool to smooth out that seam. You can add a little piece of tape along the top just to help hold it in place. Turn the hoop to the wrong side and repeat the same steps for the back top lining. Turn your hoop to the front, and it's very important you're going to open up that zipper 2/3 of the way and make sure that zipper pull isn't close to the side where it's going to be stitching, and then secure it with tape. I like to add a little extra tape where that material meets the zipper. That way it doesn't shift while you're stitching and it holds that zipper in place. Now turn your hoop to the wrong side and place the full back lining with the wrong side facing up. Make sure that it's covering where all the stitching will happen. You can kind of fold back your material and check it out, and secure it with lots of tape. I like to make sure my tape extends past the material and onto the hoop, just a little bit. Sew the next stitch sequence all the way around the lining. While stitching, just make sure that the presser foot glides smoothly over that zipper and the materials. And once you're finished stitching, just make sure that the materials didn't get caught in any way and everything laid nice and flat. And now it's time to add that little loop. Just fold the ribbon in half, and the folded portion will go on the inside of the bag. And this ribbon can be placed anywhere though, along the top, in the corners, on the other side. It's really up to you. In fact, that piece of zipper tail that was extra, you could even rip it in half, and now you have 2 little things you can use as loop. So just have some fun. Basically, fold it in half. The fold part will go on the inside. I want about a 1/2 inch on the inside of the stitching. Place it and secure with tape. Now it's time to add the back pocket, and make sure that the fusible inside is toward the bag. The fold needs to go along the top, and just make sure it's about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch below that top seam. We don't want it to accidentally get caught inside there. Place some tape along the top fold and make sure it's nice and straight. Just adjust it as needed. I also like to place a little piece of tape along the bottom, and sew stitch number 8. Next, you're going to take your back and place it wrong side facing up and center it within the width of your bag. Make sure it's covering all the stitches, and then place that foam or batting. Again, with the smaller size, I like the batting. Makes it easier to turn right side out later on. Add some tape to secure in place and sew the last stitch sequence. Once you're all finished stitching, it's time to remove the hoop from the machine and the materials from the hoop. You can put your hoop aside for now. We're finished with that. Go ahead and take your time removing all the little bits of tape. It's better to remove as much right now as you can while it's still on the stabilizer. I like to use that stabilizer as a placement for that leftover tape. And then it's time to remove the stabilizer from your project. And since it's a tearaway, it removes pretty easily. Just rip all the way around. Now it's time to do some cutting. And you're going to cut around the whole outside except for that opening, about 1/4 inch. Miter the corners. And I like to use the shorter shears. It seems to work better. And just avoid that ribbon. We want to leave as much of that ribbon in the seam allowance as possible. It'll help make holding on to your little bag more durable. And when you get to the bottom portion, go ahead and fold up that batting along where the seam is and remove all the extra right along the seam. All those little materials, we don't really need all of them. We just need the two pieces that are going to be hand stitched. You could just cut all of it away, or you can also grate it. Now it's time to turn your bag right side out. And I have to tell you, that's when this Easy Point and Turner really comes in handy. And turning it right side out is real easy. There is a video on how to use the Easy Point and Turner, so I'll have the link in the description as well. Once you've gotten it turned right side out enough, you can use the other side of the point turner to kind of push into that corner. But I'm going to show you an even better trick for when you're pushing in corners, and you can use a steam iron. I really like a bamboo point turner for getting in those corners. If you take your steam iron and just kind of lightly steam over top of the bamboo point turner, the moisture will go inside of the wood. And then when you're pushing it, you can also press a little bit more while that bamboo turner is inside. And just kind of keep repeating this process until your corners are really nice and pointy and crisp. Once you've got it where you're real happy, now it's time to close that opening and just kind of feed the materials inside the opening and give it a little press, and then we're going to secure it closed with some Wonder clips. And then we're going to hand stitch it. And hand stitching is real simple. I just use a really kind of basic whip stitch. The most important thing is just try not to stitch through more than the lining layers. When you're at the very end, do a double knot and then feed the needle back through the material. And what you can do is, if you're just going through the lining, give that knot a tug until it gets sunk into the lining. This is a great trick to hide that knot, and then just clip the thread tail. You're going to have to turn one more time, and now it's going to reveal the outside of the bag. So just use that Easy Point and Turner, use your point turner, the bamboo one, follow the same process that you did earlier, and now remove all your tape. We're also going to need to get on the inside of your bag, and remember, there is some stabilizer in the way. What's great is it's tear away, so it should relatively easily pull away, just perforates from the stitching. And just take your time and remove all of that tearaway stabilizer that is hidden behind the zipper. And now it's time to color your bag. Take your time and have some fun with this. And just as a little hint, don't feel like you have to color in the entire area. Sometimes it's nice just to kind of coloring the outlines is really a nice little effect as well. Now that we've finished the 4x4 size, let's go into a little bit more detail on how to create the 5x7 and 6x10 size, knowing that pretty much everything you've learned though is still going to apply. You're also going to need a long ribbon and some beads instead of the short ribbon and the D-ring. Pressing your inner facings is exactly the same as you did for the 4x4, except in addition to everything you did before, on the 5x7 and 6x10 size, you are going to be folding the top front along the long edge and creating a fold, and that will be the fold for your top part of your bag. The zipper is going to get inserted the same way into your hoop and stitched the same way as the 4x4. Remove the tape exactly the same as before. Now place the bottom front with the right side facing down along that bottom edge of the zipper and use some tape to secure it in place. Turn your hoop to the wrong side and place that bottom front lining with the wrong side facing up along the long bottom edge of the zipper tape. Secure with tape, and I like to use a couple of little pieces along the short ends. Make sure they secure against the plastic of the hoop, and then one long piece on that long edge. Turn your hoop to the right side, and now it's time to sew that stitch to hold the zipper in place. You can go ahead and remove that extra tape and fold the bottom front down and use the By Annie stiletto and pressing tool to press that seam nice and flat. Remember, you can use a point turner or you can also finger press it as well. I just find this works the best. When you're finished finger pressing, you can insert the hoop in the machine and sew stitch number 4. And while you've got the hoop in the machine, go ahead and change the thread for the details and sew stitch number 5, which are the detail accents. In this case, it is the hexagons and the cute little bumblebee. And remember, there is also an alternative for this particular design. There's an additional flower as well. When you're finished stitching, turn the hoop to the wrong side and remove all of the tape. Once you finish removing the tape, it's time to take that back bottom lining and fold it down south of the zipper and use the pressing tool or your finger to press that seam nice and flat, and use some tape along the top and bottom edge, which this would technically be the sides of the bag, just to kind of hold it in place. Now turn your hoop to the right side and it's time to add that front concealed zipper portion. And about 1/4 of an inch below where the zipper teeth are, I like to add that fold. So just kind of make sure that it's about 1/4 of an inch below, and once you find that perfect placement, go ahead and open up that top portion. And again, you'll see that the right side is facing the main bag, and keep an eye where that fold is and tape it to secure it in place. In just a minute, we're going to be stitching right down through the zipper and the front to secure it all together. But before we do that, we do need to add our back top lining. So let's go ahead and add that now. And with the right side facing down, you're just going to line one of the long edges up with the top of the zipper tape and just to secure it in place. And now it's time to sew that next stitch sequence to secure the zipper to the top lining portions. And once you're finished stitching, you can remove the tape, but hold on to those little pieces of tape because you can actually use those once you fold that top portion where it's now with the right sides exposed. We are going to unzip the zipper about 2/3 of the way. This is really important, so make sure you do that. Now you can use that tape to secure it down. And I like to place it right along the fold as well. Now turn the hoop to the wrong side and do the same thing and remove the tape. And then we're going to fold that top portion up and use the tape to hold it in place. You can also finger press it or use your little pressing tool as needed. Now, once you have the wrong side facing up on the hoop, you're going to place that inside back lining and place it covering all the stitch areas and secure it along the top and the bottom, and I like to do it on the sides as well. And now sew the next stitch sequence, which will hold the lining to the front. While stitching this, it's a good idea to stay close to your machine and make sure that the presser foot doesn't get caught in that top flat portion. From there on out, you should be okay for stitching. And when you're finished stitching, you can go ahead and remove all the tape from that top front portion. And it's a good idea to make sure that your stitching got caught on both sides and it looks really good and no materials got flipped over while stitching. Now it's time to add our loop or our handle. You're just going to fold it in half and place about 1/2 of an inch on the outside of the stitching. But remember, like I said earlier, you can really put this handle or loops or tiny loops or whatever you want, wherever you want. But in this case, we're going to put about 1/2 of an inch of the 2 raw edges on the outside of the stitching and secure with lots of tape. Make sure you fold the handle so that it's definitely on the inside of all the stitching so it doesn't get caught inside our bag seam. And now it's time to add our pocket. Remember, we want to place the fusible part that gives it the body along the bag part. The fold is going to go closest to the zipper, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch below the top seam. We're going to sew the next stitch sequence, which is a construction seam that holds the bag in place. And now it's time to add the back and the foam or the batting. And once your seam is stitched, you are ready to remove your hoop from your machine and your hoop from your materials. Just like before, remove all of that tape, and you can also remove the stabilizer from the project. And now it's time to cut all the outside materials around and leaving only about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Instead of using the large scissors, again, I like the short craft scissors for a lot of the pieces. I feel like I can cut through a lot better. It's just sometimes it works that way. But I'm going to let you decide that. It's entirely up to you. But when you do get to the part where the ribbon is, make sure you leave as much of that ribbon seam allowance as possible. It'll help secure the bag and make it more durable. And just like before, continue to cut the mitered edges. Now when it comes to that bottom open seam, I do like to use the longer shears for this and make sure you're cutting along the seam allowance. And with the same thing as before, we want to kind of grade our seams in here. There's a lot of different layers involved. If you just cut it off at one seam allowance size, sometimes what happens is it just gets really bulky. So grading is just making every layer slightly different seam allowance size. So maybe like an 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, a 1/2 inch, however you want, but just make sure you leave the two primary pieces of the seam allowance that you need at least at like a 1/2 inch to an inch. And now turning right side out is never been easier with that easy point and turner. Just put the pointed side in, close it down, and turn it right side out. The idea is that it turns it right side out enough so that you're not having to stick your whole hand in there and really cause any pain to your hand. What you are going to want to do though is use that bamboo point turner and the easy point and turner in tandem. Just kind of go back and forth until you get nice crisp points. Remember the trick I showed you too with pressing, so you can always do that. Use that steam iron, just like this. Now it's time to fold the seam allowances inside themselves, and we're going to press it down real good, give it some steam, and we're going to hand stitch that opening close using our Windsor clips and a hand sewing needle. Once you're finished hand stitching, you're going to turn the bag right side out for the final part, which is the pocket, and it will reveal the outside of the bag. So use your easy point and turner, and you can also use your point turner for this, just like you have for the entire project. Give your bag a good press, use some steam, and now it's time to reveal the inside of your bag. And the best way to do this is to open up the zipper. You can try and give it a little tug. You can also use a seam ripper. Just get that tearaway cut a little bit and then use the ball portion inside the bag to help rip it open as well. And from there you can really just kind of dig away at it, and the stitching will help perforate the tearaway stabilizer. And now we're nearly done, and on the larger bags, because you have that little purse handle kind of wristlet strap, you get to add some fun beads. Just go to your craft store and find beads that have large holes in them. That way they will slip onto the strap with no problem. This is just a regular piece of ribbon, but it is kind of thick. So just kind of fold the ribbon in layers so that you can feed it in, and you might need to use a pair of needle nose pliers to help pull that material, pull that ribbon through the hole. Just keep having fun adding more and more beads, and I would encourage you to go to the craft store and get lots of different kinds of beads and kind of keep them in your stash. This way you have lots of options when you're making these bags. Now at the very end, go ahead and tie a knot into that wristlet strap to hold the beads in place, and make sure it's nice and tight, and there you go. Now let's add a little charm to the zipper. And I found this really adorable bead charm at Michael's. They had lots of different charm options, but you can just use an extra jump ring and your little pliers and feed it onto the little charm, and then feed that onto the zipper pull. And just crimp it down to make sure it's nice and secure. And there you go, your bag is all finished, and last but not least, you get to add your color, and voila, there, it's all finished. Your coloring book bag in the hoop is all done.